All right, good morning. Doc D in the dungeon. I'm going to do a quick tutorial on DraftSight. Um, it's a fairly user-friendly platform, but there's not a whole lot of reviews and information that's widely available on the net. And so this is the program that we use for our laser cutter. And I do like the program in that it is a pretty basic program, but it does have cross-platform functionality. And what I mean by that is that I can type a command that works in a different platform, and it will cross-reference what that command is within DraftSight. An example would be the array command, which is an AutoCAD command. In DraftSight is pattern, and when we go through this I'll actually do that. So the program, I have a template that's already set up, and this is what I give out to students. And so you can see now that we have an area that has a grid that's on it, and then we also have an area that's bounded by these green panels. This is the cut area of my laser cutter. It's 18 inches by 24 inches. And so I do this as a visual spatial relation so that I can see, what it looks like in relation to a known distance. On the bottom, so what I like about this program the most is that it allows me to do command line input. And so down on the bottom is the command line input, and if I wanted to type a line, I can type line, and it'll say, okay, let's do a line, and it gives me some options: segment, enter to continue from last point, or specify start point. All right. So I love that because I learned CAD programs in 1989. I believe it was AutoCAD Release 10, and that's how we did things. Is that you type line, circle, rectangle, all that good stuff. And so that's how I think when I design parts. That's how I think. Now it also does have a graphic user interface up here, graphical user interface (GUI). But for the most part, I utilize the command line, just because that's how I think, that's how I learn, that's how I think. So right now you see that all it's wanting to do is draw lines at 90 degrees. Right. So if we look down at the bottom here, I have some options that I can turn on. So snap, if I turn on snap, then whatever my snap distance is set, the cursor will only move in that amount of increments. It's handy every now and then, but for the most part I typically use snap off. Grid turns on and off our little reference grid. And then Ortho. Ortho is a great tool if you're trying to draw straight lines or lines that are at a 90 degree. So right now I'm in the line command, and it's wanting me to specify a second point. And so if I wanted to get a straight line, now that looks very straight, but it's not. But if I turn on Ortho, I only have the opportunity to draw a straight line. So being a left click, all right, and then it only gives me the opportunity to draw at 90-degree increments. And each time I click, it creates an endpoint, and I can just continue on. eSnap. If I go down here and I right-click the eSnap and select Settings, this will allow my cursor to snap to different object references. And so what I have highlighted is endpoint, midpoint, center point, quadrant, intersection, and perpendicular. Those are the ones that I use most frequently, and I use these tools to create the geometry that I want, that I need for my drawing. And so I can come in and turn off different aspects or turn on different aspects. If I have a very complex drawing that has a lot of geometry in a very small area, I will come in and I will turn off everything except for what I'm trying to find. And then that allows me to easily snap just to that one spot and move on with my drawing. So a very powerful tool to utilize. All right, so those are the ones we'll talk about: Snap, Grid, Ortho, and eSnap. The others we'll get into in another video. What I want to do is just get you to the point where you are able to create some basic geometry. And so let's talk about that. So I have a few different line types that I have already constructed within the template that I send out to my students. And so I've got the drop down bar. 0 is the default layer. You can't get rid of that. It's always there. And it actually is a more or less a construction or dimensional layer. The next one is construction. This is a line type that I created. And that's what this, all of this stuff is a construction line because it's white. So we have def points. I don't use that. Engrave. So engrave gives me green lines, a bright green line. And so I utilize that so that it's easy to keep in mind what it is that you're trying to do. We also have a vector cut. So I'll click on it. And it's red. So I set this up this way so that when students turn in a drawing to me, I can look at it and give it a very quick sanity check to see, okay, the gray are construction lines or dimensional lines that basically assist with the layout of your geometry. The green, the bright green, means that you don't want to cut all the way through the material, and so we use those for typically rastering text, images, things of that nature. And then the red is a vector cut, and with that I am expecting to cut all the way through my part. So I use these to, again, make it very easy to set up a drawing, and then I can look at your drawing and know immediately what it is that you're trying to do. One of the things that causes the most havoc for me is when a student decides to create their own line type and then expect to do one of these actions with it, whether it be engrave or vector cut or whatever. Because the line type has to be right. If I want a vector cut, meaning I want to cut all the way through the object, the line should be a width of 0. And if it's anything greater than 20, when it goes to the laser cutter will completely disregard it as a vector cut, and it will treat it as a raster engrave. All right. Enough on that. So let's talk about ways that we can select things. So I can click individual things, and as long as I'm clicking, it'll let me select different things. Now when I press enter, all right, we're done. Okay. Another way is that I can do a lasso starting from the left and dragging down to the right. And the way that works is that anything that is completely encompassed, any line segment or geometry that is completely encompassed by that lasso will be highlighted. But anything that is not will not be. So here we go. So this will not be highlighted, this will not be highlighted, this will not be highlighted, that will not be highlighted. All right. Now I also have another lasso that I can come from the right and drag left, and then anything that it crosses, it selects. Again, another useful tool. If I want to delete something, I can just select it and press the delete button, and it goes away. I also have an undo button up here, which is handy because a lot of times we select something that we did not intend to and delete it. And then we also have a redo. So I'm going to go ahead and delete all of that. Let's talk about some very simple geometry. We've already done the line, but we'll do it again. So when I type line, it gives me this little cross here saying, hey, where do you want to start from? And I can just pick anywhere. Right now I have ortho on, but maybe I don't want ortho on. Maybe I just want to draw a line. And then as long as I keep clicking, it will continue to do whatever action that I've been doing. When I'm done, I can just hit escape, and that will save it. How about a circle? Well, I can click on the circle up here, pick up a midpoint, and drag. If I wanted to set a radius of 0.1, the default of this is radius. And so if I just type 0.1, that will give me a circle with a 0.1 radius, very small. So let's undo that. And let's do a circle with a radius of 1. There we go. Or let's do a rectangle. And again, you can use the GUI, or you can just type this. And again, this is just how I learned. Alright, so I'm going to pick a start corner and then drag and drop it to whatever I want. Or I can also do a rectangle. And if I just press the enter button again, it will do the exact same thing that the last command was, whatever that was. So now instead I'm just going to click a start point, and then I have an opportunity to say area, dimensions, or rotation, or specify the. So I use this a lot, dimensions. And it's going to ask me for the horizontal distance first, and let's say 5 inches. And then it'll ask me for the vertical, and I'm going to say 4 inches. And so there it drew it. If I wanted to move one of these things, all I have to do is select it, type in the move command, and then it's asking me from what point I want to move it. And so again, with my eSnap, the way that I have it set up, I have endpoint, midpoint, center point, quadrant point. Center and quadrant only refer to circles, intersection, and perpendicular. So there's an intersection, there's a midpoint, there's an endpoint, midpoint, endpoint, or an intersection. And so I'm going to bring it down here and put it there. So that is some real easy geometry. I can also do a polygon. It's going to ask for the number of sides. I'm going to say 6. Specify the center point. Go there. Specify the distance option, either corner or side. And I'm going to go corner. Now I can drag and drop, or again I can type in, we'll say a 3.5, and it will just do its thing. So all these are on the vector cut here layer right now. So let's go ahead and let's delete out a lot of this. And let's take this. And I'm just going to move it over here. Now I want to lay out a circle that's in the center. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and change over to my construction layer. I'm going to do a line. And then I'm going to do another line. And so now I have a circle, or excuse me, a point that is in the center of this particular rectangle. So I can go circle, pick up that center point, and draw that. Let's say that I want to put a small circle here as well. So do the same thing, and then I'm going to do 0.25 radius. Right. Now I can just copy that. And the hand wheel, I guess I should mention that. If you scroll forward, it makes it bigger. If you scroll backwards, it makes it smaller. All right, so I use the copy command, and then I pick the center of that circle as my point that I wanted to use as a reference, and then I have all of that. So now I have a bolt pattern that I've laid out with the dimensions required, and then I have a center hole as well. So I want to go ahead and cut these. So I'm going to click on each of these, and I'm going to click over here in Align Type, and I'm going to call it Vector Cut, and hit Escape. So now I have the all those circles as vector cuts. Now if I were going to cut this, so I'm going to use another command. It's called trim, and I selected the whole thing, and I'm going to delete out all the places that I wouldn't need to cut. And I'll leave my construction lines in there just as a reference, so that if I need to go back at a later time, that data is still there, and I can snap on those points, and that will bring me right back to the center of that circle. Let's say that I want to engrave some text. So I'm going to go up here, insert. Alright, so we want to insert text. I'm on my home button here. I click text, and again it gives me a place to start with, and I just drag and drop, and then I'm going to type in whatever I want. So there it is. Press enter. Nope, not enter. Yes. All right, so now I have text. It's on the construction layer right now. And so I can do a lot of different things with that. What I typically will do is I'm going to do the explode text command, which will basically break all that apart. And so now I have some very simple geometry here. And I want to go ahead and I'm going to engrave that. So I'm going to put it on the engraved layer. And we notice now that it's all in green. But let's say that I want to fill that. Now I could actually take that text without exploding it, and I could engrave it, but it doesn't show up quite as well as what I'm about to do. So I select all of that, and I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to click on this, which is the hatch command. And the pattern that I use the most is called net 3. It shows up very well. And then I change the scale to 0.25, which makes it very small. And then specify entities, which I've already specified. And then I hit OK. And now what we see is that all of that got filled in, and that is one entity, that whole etching there. So I'm going to go ahead and put that on the engraved layer as well. And so now it will actually cut out this pattern. And with all of the little peaks and valleys in there, it actually shows up extremely well in the engraving. So there we have that. Some other tools that I might use is the dimension. And if you click on it, it defaults to smart dimension, which never seems to work right. So typically I use linear dimension, and then I can just pick one spot to another, and it will give me my dimensions. And I typically, if I need these, I will leave them on there in a construction layer, just like that is. And when we go to send the file to the laser cutter just disregards anything that's on this construction layer. And if I wanted to delete that, I can just select it and hit delete, and we are ready. So there is a, well, I guess I need to tell you, so file, go on the default system thing here, file, save as, and then you can save your drawing to whatever you want. And you can just save it as a revision 2013 drawing.dwg. All right, so that gives you some basics to work with within DraftSight. The best way to learn this program is just to get in and start drawing things. Again, I find it to be a very user-friendly platform. It does have a few quirks. They all do. This one has less than the others. There are some things that, when I'm cutting, when I send files to the laser cutter itself, there are a few quirky things that I just have to be aware of and take into account when I'm doing that. All right, that's all we have for this session. Thank you.